Okay, we get it, Dirk said. Jesus, which, just to be clear, is being used as a profanity, not a reference to any work of literature, past, present, or future, in which Jesus is a character. But what's most important now, Anna continued, is that ridiculous Dante interlude you shoehorned in. I can't say I'm at all surprised that you're a fan of the most famous self-insert fanfiction in the traditional Western canon, but this one's a little different, and you should know better than anyone how important structure is. You made Acorn into your Dante, and Minos your Virgil, which is a little confusing because Minos is already a character of the Inferno, playing his traditional mythological role as one who judges the damned and assigns them a spot in hell. And your cat Minos is also playing that role, but the point is that there's one role that you left conspicuously unfilled. Beatrice, Dirk said quietly. Damn straight. The figure who knows of hell but dwells in heaven. How very like you to focus on the angsty moping dudes while ignoring the woman who's really pulling all the strings. By the way, just FYI, literally every single work you alluded to in the stub story was written by a man. All of them. Which is pretty fucked up really, I'm just saying. You might want to have a hard think about that. Anyway, by killing me, albeit temporarily, you made me a perfect fit for the part of Beatrice, existing in the spaces in between. Now, in the Divine Comedy, Beatrice sees Dante being chased by wild animals, so she orders Virgil to lead them to her. So, by analog, I gave you power over Minos, Dirk finished. That's right, but due to your sloppiness with the structure of your references, I not only got control of Dante Minos, I also became the commander of the version of Minos who was the judge of the dead. And I don't think that you're exactly eager to be judged by me, am I right? Dirk was drumming the fingers of his left hand on the side of his leg. I follow you so far, he said, but how do you know all this? All the exact details of it, I mean. All those characters that you absorbed became whatever. They and your Deus Ex dyslexia gave you this power, but who gave you the overarching knowledge of the structure in which your power operates? You did, Dirk, Anna said. As skeevy as it sounds, I've got a little splinter of you in my head right now, which raises several very interesting and concerning implications. First and foremost of which, you see yourself as a literary character. Well, I'm here in this fucking book, aren't I? Dirk said, waving his arms around. If that doesn't make me a literary character? Anna shook her head, the motion causing another trickle of the mysterious fluid to drip from her shoulder. No, that's just a version of you on the inside. In this text, I needed to pass through a version of you in order to absorb it, necessarily putting it outside the text. You and your life outside this book frame your existence as literary. Is it because you want your life to be poetic? You want whatever tragedy there is in it to be dramatic and orderly and cathartic because you think that'll give it purpose, meaning? Does thinking of yourself as a character in a story make you sleep easier at night? After all, if everyone else is just a character too, then you're justified in your complete inability to make genuine connections with them. Or do you genuinely believe that there's an author figure controlling your life? Because that would be at best incredibly vain and at worst a symptom of psychosis. Fine, you've got me all figured out. Congrats, you win the Freudy, which is a gold statue of a couch with a figure of a sad little man who looks like me lying on it. The award ceremony's in September. Start writing your speech. I'll be sure to thank the Academy, Anna said. You say we're going to judge, Minos said. But I get the feeling, Acorn, that you aren't the one we'll be judging this time. The structure has been turned inside out, Betancourt said, quick on the uptake. The intent of the narrative was for Acorn to be judged, but now we, will judge the narrative itself, returning its own rules against it. Acorn nodded. Yes, the three of us will review the evidence and decide whether this book should have ever been. That's why I brought us here. It's both thematically appropriate and, depending on our verdict, will be an efficient and poetic mechanism to carry out our justice. And this place is, Minos prompted. It's the 8th and highest layer of purgatory, Acorn said. Terrestrial paradise. Dirk modeled his Inferno after Dante's, so it only makes sense that the poet's other 2 volumes are equally presented. Welcome to Canto 31 of Purgatorio. It's so much better to be able to flat out explain these things, Jean said appreciatively. Nowhere of that opaque tee-hee, do you get my obscure reference? Nonsense. Acorn and Minos nodded. Acorn continued. Damn fucking straight. And here's some more explanation for you. In the Divine Comedy, Dante indeed includes the 5 classical rivers that Dirk mentioned on page 45, but they're arranged a bit differently than they are in Greek tradition, which Dirk would have known if he'd researched the content of the poem instead of just his form. Instead of being spread willy-nilly through the underworld, each has a specific place and function. The Akron is the outmost border of hell, Styx in the 5th circle with the wrathful, the Phlegethon is a boiling river of blood in the 7th circle that's guarded by centaurs. Sounds like the cover of a death metal album, am I right? And the Cocytus is in the 9th circle where it forms a frozen lake that holds Satan himself. The 5th river, though, isn't in hell at all. It's right here in purgatory. It's the last barrier that pure souls cross before they can enter heaven. They drink from it and forget all their earthly sins. Levy, Betancourt whispered, looking with awe and fear at the river in front of them. Thematically appropriate indeed, Minos said approvingly. Did Anna explain all this to you? Betancourt asked Acorn. Yes, Acorn said. Oh, I should have mentioned, she's Beatrice now, metaphorically at least. I don't really get all of it, but she also told me that she and the girls are working on their own plan in tandem with ours. They're trying to fix all of this bullshit too. Their thing's a bit different, but if either one succeeds, we'll be able to be free of this damn thing. He prodded at the book on the ground with his hoof. Once and for all. All 3 of them looked at the thin paperback on the ground. A pile of wood pulp slurry and sheep ink that had somehow become the force that ruled all their lives. There was a moment of apprehension. Was this thing, the dead thing they stared at, sacred, or was it profane? Was there any difference? Jeanne Betancourt picked the book up. Let's figure this out, she said. She opened it to the first page. Now, Anna said resolutely, I think we've thoroughly explained all of the how that's going on here. Time to move on to the what, namely, what we're going to do to fix this mess. Hang on, Pawnee said. I think you owe me and Pam one of our own whats too. Like, what the fuck is this book world you're suddenly telling us that we're living in? That would be a good place to start. A gift, said Pam dreamily. Pawnee gestured wildly at the girl, flailing her arms, marking the universal sign for this! Fucking look at this! Also, she shouted at Anna, you can tell us what the fuck is going on with Pam! All this vague, creepy prophet shit is seriously weirding me out and simultaneously making me feel like I'm the asshole for not instantly and magically understanding everything. Anna nodded. Yes, I do owe both of you that. In an instant, the trickle of the mysterious shimmering fluid dripping from Anna's shoulder turned into a torrent, a blast of radiance that hit the ground, and then reflected straight up, growing stronger and wider and brighter, until all 3 of the pony pals were engulfed by a column of the light? The liquid? Light? It was... she was... Oh, now I understand. Of course I can't describe it. The light is, or represents, a barrier that I can't narrate through. Narrate from narrare to relate, but also naris to know. And I don't know, I can't know this. I'm figuratively and quasi-literally in the dark. If Anna was developing this power all along, or at least since she died, then that's how I was able to avoid detection, Anna interrupted, as the light that had surrounded her and her friends faded. I guess there's at least one more how after all. How I stayed out of your sight while I started to semi-unconsciously make the story veer off course. I mean, if anyone was going to notice a few words out of place, it would have to be someone as anal and controlling as you. Thanks, said Dirk, only half sarcastically. It was small things at first, things that didn't even matter. On page 36, you wrote me drinking whiskey, I changed it to brandy. Again, I'd tell you to check, but... Anna made a small gesture that conveyed the statement, but my god pony stole your Metairie cursive book and ran away with it. Anna was very good at gestures. Eventually, Anna continued, I started slightly revising entire lines of dialogue. Speech was harder to change than the rest, but I managed. And my influence gave Pawnee and Pam some wiggle room, and they started slightly diverging from your plan too. Just some synonym replacement here and there, but it mattered, because once my friends and I got a taste of that free will, even if we weren't aware of it as such, we became powerful enough to completely disrupt the narrative, rather your narrative, the fake one, on page 54. Pam opened her mouth as if to speak, but hesitated. Her brain gears were apparently shifting into overdrive too. And your arm thing? Dirk asked, obviously frustrated that he couldn't be more precise with his words. Oh right, that, Anna said, glancing at her shoulder. I think it's some sort of manifestation of the parts of the original story that you effaced. It's an echo in this reality of the arm that I was supposed to still have. and synecdochically of all the text that you covered up. Therefore, you can only see and describe the faintest trace of it. Makes sense to me, Dirk said. Also, synecdochically is a good word. Everyone gathered in the hellish clearing nodded in agreement. After their shared moment of logophilia, also a good word, Anna glanced at the other three and asked, "So, are we good now? Can we move on?" "Yes, let's," Dirk said. "The logic of everything is still fuzzy in places, but we've been doing nothing but stand here, explaining things to each other for what feels like hours. No action at all, just talking heads. Super boring." The narrative perked up its metaphorical ears. "You know what?" it thought to itself. "He's right. This is really boring. And the stuff with Acorn's group is pretty much just standing and talking too. Now, I know I said earlier that I wasn't relevant and wouldn't go off on my own again, but..." The narrative squirmed like a worried ferret. Then it started to squirm even harder, worked up by self-satisfaction at the callback it had just made to page 49. "But what the hell, am I right? Let's check on something more dynamic. Then we'll come back here, I promise."